And we're live. So currently we have Godless Scummer in the chat. Hello. And hello to anyone who is currently lurking or may be watching in the future.
Hi.
Yeah, sorry, things are a bit late, but little bit of shilling. I was on Atheist flashbacks earlier this morning, and it kind of pushed everything up because we got started later than we wanted to. But we've got Mama Atheist in the chat. Hello.
Hey, Manda.
Yeah.
Cool. So, what are we doing this week, or puppy god?
Okay. I was gonna hold on. I was gonna shill this later, but since you brought up the puppy god,
Look, even he's bowing down.
hold on, because I did a thing this morning. Hold on.
Hi, Summer.
Let's see.
Do we have the 10 Commandments of the puppy god?
No, but we do have a. Hold on. I'll get the screen share up. I do have a Teespring store.
Ooh.
Including shirts and such that say Pupocracy 2020.
Yay! Pupocracy 2020.
Also, the burning mummy is not a monk weapon. And my channel banner as well. That's what I've got so far. And every design also has a mask.
I definitely want your logo with Roll Initiative on it.
Yeah, my I forgot who made my logo, so I want to get permission from them first.
That would be me.
Oh. Okay, so yeah, so merch with my logo should be forthcoming soon.
How tired are you?
Yeah.
Poor thing. Pets.
Well, to be fair, around the time that you made the logo, Jay made my intro, and Jen made the intro for Media Musings. So, a bunch of people made me stuff all around the same time.
Fair. Okay, fair enough. Anyway, today's topic.
Yes, today's topic is The Princess Bride, which, as Carrie always said, there is a shortage of perfect movies out there. It'd be a shame to ruin this one.
But we'll certainly give it a try.
Well, to be fair, he said that in a tweet about a potential reboot of The Princess Bride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be fair, that's probably the best you could hope for in a reboot.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and, while Heck, Hissy gets a really big chunk of my paycheck. Well, at least it goes towards our shared debt. So
yeah, we're trying to clear debt so I can get my husband in a country he belongs in with me.
yeah,
So buy his Teespring.
yeah,
Buy Teespring merch.
yes. I'll probably slap the link in the description because I literally just threw it up this morning.
Cool.
But anyways, so while The Princess Bride isn't the perfect movie, because in my opinion, the perfect movie cannot exist, it is a perfect movie. It's
I think it's near perfect.
It's one of those movies where it is what it is, and it does such a good job of being what it is. It's the perfect example of what it is, if that makes sense.
But how many other movies are there in that particular niche that The Princess Bride filmed?
Well, okay. Well, for an example, I would say the original Blues Brothers is a perfect jukebox musical.
Okay, so what we're talking about is if someone gave you a checklist of what you would want this movie to be, it ticks every box.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I can roll with that as a definition of perfect.
Yeah, it is, the perfect example of it. It has achieved like itness.
It has the X factor. Don't sue me, Simon Cowell. It is. It's just a great movie. Yeah. It's got everything. It's got love. It's got stories. It's got Columbo.
Yeah.
Which is just.
I'll buy it.
Oh,
thank you, Sammy.
So,
but it's it's got giant sword fights. It's got giant sword fights. Maidens in peril, true love. I know I bought.
They're gonna be kissing again.
Yeah, and I will. Okay, you know what?
I thought you didn't like the kissing.
So, and another thing that's great about the Princess Bride is it's doubly meta. In that, so you have the narrative of the story, and then the meta narrative of the grandpa, telling, reading the child, reading the sick kid the story. It has Andre the Giant. Enough said.
Yeah, enough said.
But then, when someone watches The Princess Bride for the first time, they pretty much go through the same emotional journey that the kid goes through in his arc. Where it's like, why am I watching this? Oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Also, at what point do you realize as the audience that it's a satire?
Ooh.
Did you realize as you were watching, after you watched? Because there's so many layers to this film. You've got the narrative, the meta narrative, the audience reception, and satirical elements. That it's a satire of what it's a perfect example of.
Yeah.
And I do love the idea that in order to make a perfect example of something, you have to satirize it.
I didn't really peg it as a satire.
You don't think it's a satire of every fairy story, fairy tale ever?
Oh, I see. Having it as a satire kind of goes against the meta narrative of getting invested in the story.
Because Because that's not what it's satirizing. Satire as a genre. As opposed to satirical humor.
Okay. So Scummer realized very on that it was satire.
Mm.
And I do kind of get the you know what? I can kind of get it, because the very sappy bit at the beginning with Buttercup and Wesley, like obviously playing to the sappy tropes, and then of the landed noble lady falling in love with the farmhand.
Yeah. So definitely a satirization of those sort of classic romance tropes and the fairy tale tropes.
You've got a couple of times during those opening scenes, you've got the kid cutting in with "Come on."
Exactly. So it's very, very blatantly satirizing that. But even stuff like satirizing the bishop, who is always this steadfast, stoic character in fairy tales, and in this one he's got a speech impediment.
Yes.
Don't yet, not yet. Have fun storming the castle. It's just it's all pure satire. Dead is not actually nearly dead. He's not totally dead. It's just it just takes every idea and every trope of the classic boy meets girl. They go on an adventure, storm the castle, kill the dragon, although there are no dragons. Kind of story, and takes shreds off it. The closest you get to a dragon is a rodent of unusual size.
I don't believe they exist.
Now do you see where the satire is?
And the thing is, if you're looking for it and thinking about it like that, you do realize it's a satire, but it's very cleverly hidden behind the witty dialogue, and it's not while it is a satire, it's not in your face about it.
But it's also a satire on sort of the growth of television as well. The comment from the old man of, when I was your age, television was called books.
Yeah. And you do get the kind of one of the kind of themes in regards to at least the meta narrative is how a story can bridge generations and bring us together.
Definitely, yeah. Regardless of whether it's on screen and book. I do love the sort of the humour of, you've got this old man railing against television and movies in a movie.
Yeah.
It's just, it's so cleverly and intelligently done.
Yeah.
And it just appeals to all ages as well. No kid's going to sit there and get the comment from Wesley, if there's a shortage of perfect breasts in the world, it's a kid with the kind of jaws. But every adult in the room's going to crack up laughing at that.
Though also, it does have some very timely messages about it, specifically regarding this year. Masks are terribly comfortable. I believe everyone will be wearing them in the future.
Oh, I knew you were going to say something like that.
Did I break you?
Yeah. Didn't take long, did it?
No.
ABC.exe is failing to respond. Please wait for reboot. Of course, it's not one of the two classic blunders, but getting Ring talking about Princess Bride is definitely the third one.
Yeah. But so, anyways, the movie begins with the kid who's homesick from school and playing a baseball video game on what I think is an Atari, but I don't know old consoles, and this movie was made in the 80s.
Probably.
You know what? I'm going to get my facts straight live on stream. Because that's always how things should be done.
Absolutely.
Should never prepare in advance. 1987. So late 80s.
Yeah.
And honestly, it is the best of the fantasy movies that came out at that in that surge of fantasy movies of the late 80s, early 90s, where we also had films like, I think, Wicket, Lady Hawk, Legend, The Princess Bride. Obviously, one of these has risen kind of above the status of cult classic, and obviously it's the one I've seen.
Yeah.
Also, I think it's like one of the few late 80s like fantasy movies that didn't have like a pop rock synthy soundtrack to it.
Yeah, it's got a very traditional soundtrack, hasn't it? It's and I think that really suits it because it makes it timeless.
Yeah. And
there's
so
soundtracks you can pick,
Yes.
I know certainly you know what era they're from immediately, but this one you just don't. It could have been made in the 50s, it could have been made yesterday.
Yeah, and Godless Scummer and Sammy Jenkins say either Commodore 64 or Atari's 2600, and Godless Scummer agrees that Commodore 64 is most likely.
Well, they would know, so I'm not even gonna. Yeah,
I'm not gonna. The point is that he's playing video games.
He's playing video games, so he's a very sort of stereotypical young kid in the 80s, more interested in the screen than anything else, and then Grandad shows up with a book.
Yep, played by everyone's favorite bumbling detective.
Just one more thing.
Yeah, Peter Falk, also known, also more famously known for his role as Columbo.
The thing is, I grew up with Columbo before I ever saw The Princess Bride, so to see him there was just, it was brilliant. My mental image always is of Columbo reading that story.
And I think a lot of the original audience would have that mental image because I'm fairly certain Columbo was made way before The Princess Bride. As I think Columbo's like late 60s, or at least 60s and 70s.
Yeah, but even still, it's still that same look. He had the long coat, Italian grandfather, isn't he? He's very he's in that way. Cigar, all of it's just there. But
just one more thing.
Yeah. My wife would really love your autograph. I can't whistle, so I'm not going to try. Neither could Columbo, but it didn't stop him.
Yeah.
But
so you heard it here first. You heard it here first, folks. The Princess Bride is a stealth Columbo sequel.
It's a mystery. It's got sword fights. It's yeah. This is our sense of humor, folks. You're gonna have to deal with it.
Yeah. My point exactly is Columbo was already established by the time this movie was released. So
well established, yeah.
So the audience would have that Columbo connection because that's the role that Peter Falk was most well known for. And in my memory, the kid's granddad was wearing the Columbo coat and smoking a cigar.
He was, absolutely.
Yeah. So Columbo reads his grandson, or goes to read his grandson this book that he explains, was, read to him by his, read to him while he was sick by his father, and he read it for his kid when, he was sick, and now he's reading it to his grandson.
There's a beautiful prophecy in that the generation who watched this film first went on to show this film to their kids, and they've probably gone on to show it to their kids.
Yeah.
So,
which is, an extension of the extra, the extra meta layer. Because as the story starts, the kid isn't into it at all.
Yeah. We've all been there, that book that someone keeps telling you to read and you just, Yeah.
Though, in some cases, Cough Les Mis, no matter how well its reputation is, sometimes it's not exactly worth reading the entire thing.
Yeah, this definitely. I keep saying I'm going to read the book, but never get around to it.
Same here.
So we've got the story, and immediately out of the gate, we've got the tall, dark stranger for Buttercup there as an adult.
No, not tall. He's not a tall, dark stranger yet. He's the farmhand Wesley.
But he becomes the tall, dark stranger.
But anyways, Buttercup
dresses in dark clothes.
Yeah, Buttercup is a bit of a bitch.
I mean, that's putting it lightly.
Demanding rather demeaning tasks, and Wesley replies with 3 simple words. The words of this episode's title: "As you wish."
The same words you said when I said, "Let's do Princess Bride."
Yeah.
So,
reminds me. I'm just gonna leave that there for a couple seconds.
Yeah. And I think the beauty, I like the way that bit is filmed, where he kept saying "as you wish." You already know before it cuts back to Peter Falk that he's not saying "as you wish," he's saying "I love you."
Yeah.
And it's so beautifully filmed.
Yeah.
That it's just, and it's a really great way of establishing sort of that unrequited love story.
Yeah. But it begins to be requited.
Yeah. And it's the great trope of you don't know what you've got till it's gone.
Yeah. Well, no, it begins to be requited, and then in order for Wesley to, be able to marry her, he goes to sea to, earn his fortune, so he can be a worthy husband or a worthy suitor, and then his ship is taken by the dread pirate Roberts, who doesn't leave any survivors.
Oh. He knew that was going to happen. Yeah, and that's a great little. It's a classic. If he doesn't leave any survivors, how's he dreaded, and how does anyone know who he is?
Yeah.
Seriously, it's a classic fantasy trope that they really, really played with.
Yeah.
And it's because it's always that one, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the idea of passing down a lineage, even if it's not a royal lineage, as well.
Yeah. Which I also watched this with my family, huddled in the lounge room. One of a few great memories of this movie.
Yeah, definitely. I have to admit, Ring showed me this movie first. I'd not seen it before he showed it to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know I can speak from experience that pretty much whoever watches this movie goes through the same arc as the kid does, because
Yeah.
I showed this to Hissy, and if I remember right, we showed this to your dad.
Yeah, no, I looked at this and I went, "What are you showing me? What is this? What do I look like to you, some 6-year-old girl?" And then you put it on, and I was like, "Okay, it's Peter Falk. I'll give it a go." And then I was like, "Oh!" And then by the end, I was like, "No!"
Yeah.
So I really did go through that emotional arc with the character, and it is really beautifully done. The way it's all put together.
Yeah.
And, when he stopped and he was like, "But you don't like," I was like, "No! Damn kid!" Oh, I was cursing that kid in that moment.
Yeah.
All that no kiss.
Yeah.
But
anyways, because Buttercup is a fair maiden of noble birth, the most beautiful maiden in the land, she attracts the attention of the local royalty.
I mean, at least I didn't chase her around trying to give her a shoe back.
Yeah.
It's one of those, and it's the classic, the fair maiden will always be noticed by the prince.
Yeah.
And
but
this is a trope that gets to me, but yeah.
But we do get a slight subversion in that this prince is a dick.
It's like you've never read any fairy stories.
Well, okay, we get a subversion of like the Disney princess trope that most people have grown up with.
Yeah, I think what we get the subversion of is that the princess sees that he's a dick.
Yeah.
Because that's what's missing from a lot of fairy stories. It was done very well in Shrek.
Yeah.
But I don't think it would have been done in Shrek if it wasn't done in The Princess Bride.
I think it probably would have. But that's probably a topic for its own episode.
Mm.
Like,
well, for me, I think Shrek is that generation who came through Shrek. Probably is their generation's fairy tale satire in much the way the late 80s generation, this was theirs.
Yeah.
So it's, I feel like they belong in the same sort of genre there.
Yeah, well, though I will say Shrek is a bit more mean-spirited as a satire, and more obviously a satire.
Yeah. Yeah. Wesley doesn't break any gingerbread men's legs.
Yeah. You mean Humperdinck?
1,000 yards there.
Yeah. I was about to say at least the hero didn't wear tights and look like Robin Hood, but then I realized.
Well, actually. Though he definitely had a whole Mask of Zorro thing going on.
Yeah. So, and it turns out that Humperdinck actually was only really interested in marrying her for political reasons, and not the building alliances sort.
I mean, are there any other political reasons?
Yes.
Other than having a trophy wife?
Yes. Having her murdered so you can start a war.
I mean, to me, that just screams Trojan War, but...
Yeah.
But I never gave Menelaus that much credit to have come up with a plot like that.
Yeah. And Scummer's right. Scummer's, Shrek was much more aggressive.
Yeah, definitely Sammy, the Dread Pirate Roberts is definitely the bastard love child of Zorro and Robin Hood. If that fan fiction doesn't exist, it just does because rules of the internet says so.
Yeah. So, anyways, and so I guess, by like inserting like some actual court intrigue is a bit of a subversive, trope. Though, I mean, the prince is very, very much one of the main villains of the film, or of the story part of the film.
I mean, there's always court intrigue in fairy tales and stuff, but it's never the main plot point, is it?
Yeah.
Whereas with this, it feels very much like the driving force behind the plot.
Yeah, because, Buttercup is kidnapped by, Andre the Giant, Vicini, who's, I want to say played by Gilbert Gottfried, but I could very well be wrong about that. No, it's not Gilbert Gottfried, but it's a very similar voice. Oh, cripes. Hold on.
Wallace Shawn.
Yeah, Wallace Shawn. But, very much that same kind of character actor.
Yeah.
Why the fuck did I think it was Gilbert Gottfried? Now I can't not hear that voice in my head. I have cursed myself with the voice of Gilbert Gottfried.
Impression number 1, folks. Take a shot. And he's not even of the film yet.
Yeah. And, Fezzik, played by Andre the Giant, and Inigo Montoya, who we will get a much better, introduction to later.
Courtesy of himself.
Yeah.
Because that's how you introduce yourself.
Yeah.
State your name, set expectations, proceed.
Watch it. Oh. So, but they discover that they're being followed by a man in black. And
dun, dun, dun.
And this is where it very much goes into, well, okay, so there's the scene with the shrieking eels. Which, does put a bit of peril, into the scene, and is basically there to, in the sense of the meta narrative, keep the kid engaged in the story, and thus in the larger meta, keep the audience, engaged with the story. But and the lovely rhyming game between Fezzik and Inigo. Anybody want to peanut?
Yeah. That's see, there's very few films that can do the comic relief characters so well and still give them that depth.
And honestly, I think usually I side, like, I tend to side on praising the writing of a script. But for me, it seems more the case is more that it was the chemistry of the cast.
Yeah, a lot of it was the chemistry. A lot of it was the sheer talent in that cast. Because when you look at the actual script, it's not particularly tight. It's not particularly engaging on paper. And it's just trope after trope after trope. It's very derivative.
Yeah.
But on screen, it's just magic.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point, that it's so derivative that you couldn't... The book is obviously doing that, but that's what I mean by it's... Satire has to be derivative, but this almost takes... It becomes a satire of itself. It takes it so far.
Yeah, and talking about formulaic derivative, fairy tale tropes, our erstwhile hero, the Man in Black, goes through 3 trials. A trial of skill, a trial of strength, and a trial of wits. Obviously there is, the classicist will make the Hercules or Heracles connection, but it is also very evocative of just general, especially the fact that there are 3 of them.
Are you going to start talking about the hero's journey? Do I need to go get a drink?
No. I'm talking about fairy tales and folk tales.
And the rule of 3. Yeah.
And the rule of 3. And the fact that, whenever someone has, obstacles in a fairy tale or a folk tale, there are usually, there are nearly always 3 that they must get through before the story is over.
I think the rule of 3 has its own TV tropes page.
Yeah.
Everything that comes in 3s is perfect. I'm not going to try to say it in Latin, but there is a Latin phrase for it.
And
the smallest number required to make a pattern. Once is a coincidence, twice is an anomaly, 3 times is a pattern.
I think you got that a little backwards. I think it's once is an anomaly, twice is a coincidence.
Twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern. That's the one. Hey, I'm dyslexic, leave me alone. I'm a historian, not a mathematician.
Yeah. So, anyways, so we come to the first trial, or at least as after Wesley, completes a pseudo task, but it doesn't really count because he does get help from Inigo Montoya. In doing the impossible and climbing the cliffs of despair.
Yeah, just everything about this film. How did you not peg it was a satire?
And
once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And it's everywhere in this film.
And the charming back and forth with the rope. Well, not sure how much you'd want to trust me. After all, I'm only waiting around to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
Or I give you my word as a Spaniard.
Yeah, I know too many Spaniards.
and then he, swears the oath on the soul, the soul of his father, and the Man in Black says, "Okay, give me the rope."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's this constant thing where it takes a trope and deliberately subverts it.
Yeah.
But actually does it in such a way that it becomes its own trope.
And we learn that Inigo is a mercenary because revenge doesn't pay. Revenge doesn't pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
And he is searching for a six-fingered man who murdered his father, and so he spent his years studying the blade.
Yeah.
Before I've studied the blade became the cringe meme that it's become. I'm sorry to ruin your appreciation of this movie, but Inigo Montoya has studied the blade.
Yeah. Inigo Montoya is just such an interesting character. I love the guy to bits. Yeah. Then there's so many tropes in his plot line. He's got the battle cry. Revenge is a dish best served cold.
Yeah. I am Inigo Montoya. You kill my father. Prepare to die.
Drink.
But yeah, he's got the tragic backstory and like the years of study. And then the only reason he's in this gang is because it sets up this trope, and then as the movie does so often, it dashes it by saying, the only reason he's in this gang is because he needs to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And we go into the trial of skill, which is the fencing match, against, Inigo Montoya and the Man in Black. And it is, I mean, to watch, it's not that dynamic, at least to modern audiences. But from what I've watched of like Olympic fencing matches, it's fairly accurate, where it's kind of a lot of like poking at each other and like just batting the sword away.
Yeah, a lot of it's that casual danger dialogue, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the casual danger dialogue that makes the scene engaging.
Definitely. If it was just another sword fight, ugh.
Yeah. And then of course we learn that because Wesley screw it. I'm just gonna say Wesley because everyone's seen this movie. The statute of limitations on spoilers has is passed. We all know the Man in Black is Wesley. So Wesley is holding his own for a bit too long. So Inigo says, I'm not, or Wesley notices that Inigo is smiling. He asks him, why he's smiling. Inigo goes, oh, I know something that you don't know. And he swaps the sword to his other hand and says, I am not left-handed.
Neither am I.
Yeah.
Actually, I am. Like, literally, I am left-handed.
Yeah.
And that just immediately sets them on these two guys are equals, and these two guys are more than a match for each other, which is just fun.
But eventually Wesley does reach, does best the Spaniard, and but
you seem a decent fella. I hate to kill you.
You seem a decent fellow. I'd hate to die. But, while a more, fairy tale-esque ending would be Inigo dying as the result of opposing the forces of righteousness, or the protagonist. Wesley would sooner destroy a stained glass window than kill an artist such as Inigo, but he can't have him following either. So Inigo gets knocked out.
Fair. And it's the classic, isn't it? Knock him out with the the
basket hilt.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeff, we are reaching the Andre the Giant scene. So the link is in the Media Musings group if you want to jump in. Yeah.
So
any more notes on the trial of skill?
I mean, we can talk about Wesley and his Clark Kenting.
Yeah.
Or his Clark Kent Wesleyan.
Yeah.
The trial of skill is very the trial of wit. Never go up against a Sicilian when death is on the line.
Yeah.
It's very interestingly done, and it's just a classic. The way it's all put together.
Yeah.
And it immediately shows that this is the hero you're supposed to be rooting for, because the whole point of the trial of the three trials is that you're supposed to be rooting for the guy to beat them.
Yeah.
So, it's very good at establishing very early on that despite the fact this guy is a pirate, you're supposed to be rooting for him. So again, it's that subversion of classic tropes.
Yeah. Despite the fact that he's a mysterious man in black, he fights honorably, and with the swagger of your Errol, with the swagger of an Errol Flynn character.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there isn't much swinging about in that fight, but it is very much an Errol Flynn style, good old, cutlasses and bucklers and swashbuckling type style sword fight. And but so we see that our protagonist is while he may dress like something something villainous, while he is like clad in black, and he's he in every other way he's the very image of the refined, charming, swashbuckling fairy tale hero.
And we see very early on a lot about Inigo Montoya as well. The facing death honorably.
Yeah.
How many times have you seen that subverted in movies? And you get to the point where it's subverted so often into the man who says, facing death honorably and somehow manages to get out of it. You kind of don't expect Wesley to smack him around the head and knock him out.
Yeah.
We've all seen The Gladiator where he says, at least let me die a soldier's death, and then takes them all out.
Yeah.
You kind of expected something like that, and just not getting it is it's interesting, because it's that the whole point of those is it's the use of concepts of honor as a weapon.
Yeah.
Whereas Inigo literally does not move to defend himself.
Well, and also a bit of arrogance in terms of Inigo, because he points out that if he thinks that if he uses his dominant hand, it'll be over too quickly.
Mm.
But anyways, so Jeff is here, so we are going to move to the trial of strength with Andre the Giant.
Well, yeah, I was going to mainly talk a little bit about Andre the Giant in this because, and I'm going to say I am only going to be popping in for a few minutes, so I've got another stream to go and do in a little bit. So, but it's just quite a kind of there's a lot of backstory to this with his part in Princess Bride. I mean, he had done some acting before, but not really. Nothing not outstanding. He played a Bigfoot in an episode of The Incredible Hulk, and I think he'd done an unaccredited role in one of the Conan films. But the thing that's interesting about this date is that this film was released several months after his 40th birthday, and which also happened to also be WrestleMania 3, which is the highlight of his other big career. So this all happened within a month. But the significance of his 40th birthday is that was the age he was told he was going to be dead by.
Oh.
He should have been dead by the time that film.
By the time,
and even shortly before doing Princess Bride, he'd had to have major back surgery, because he had a condition called acromegaly, which is basically mean that he kept growing. I mean, it's something that's treatable now, but it certainly wasn't back then. And so he was in incredible pain. And I believe there's even like a scene. This is a scene where he catches Buttercup. They had to doctor that because he couldn't actually catch her because his back was so shot at that point. And he could barely move, and it's quite sad in a way, but also that this movie come out by the time he should have been dead by this time, and it was certainly something that he himself was incredibly proud of that movie. And there's been numerous professional wrestlers who talked to him at the time who were actually said they were kind of almost forced to sit there and watch The Princess Bride with him. Terry Funk, in his autobiography, talks. So he says, I used to travel with Andre the Giant quite a bit. He said, I must have watched that movie 200 times with him. He carried a because he was so proud of it, what that movie was, and which he should have been, because it's a brilliant movie. But yeah, I just wanted to say a little bit about Andre in that film, because I mean, that character I think was very close to his own heart as well, as a sort of gentle giant, which he kind of was in real life. Although by all accounts as well, if you did get on his wrong side, you want to get well clear. So
he does have that reputation of having been a really nice bloke, but gentle giant, but do not just.
If he didn't like you, you just stayed well away. And probably towards the end of his life, he was a bit more aggressive because he was in constant pain.
And in the fight scene between between Wesley and Andre the Giant.
I think I said in the comments, I think Andre sold that better for Wesley than he did for Hulk Hogan.
Jeff really bringing the sunshine and rainbows to the streets. But that in and of itself is a subversion of a fairy tale trope. Because you'd expect Andre the Giant to be playing like your typical ogre. But
he'd be grunt number 2, wouldn't he? That would be
And the interesting thing I should point out as well, that by the time this film was released, in Andre's other major career, which is professional wrestling, he had just turned and become a bad guy. And he was like the most hated wrestler because he'd turned on the beloved Hulk Hogan, which is kind of interesting to say in retrospect now. Now that we know Hulk Hogan's a racist prick, but and that was weird that because he bought it because by the time shortly after the film Andre had his hair cut because he had that like long hair that he'd had for years in The Princess Bride. So I think it was very strange to a lot of people who maybe followed wrestling to see him suddenly playing a nice guy, like a nice character again after like suddenly becoming like the most the most bad evil character in wrestling.
Yeah, so not only once again there's a sort of meta trope that's set up because you cast a wrestler who's currently playing a heel as the second trial, the trial that needs to be overcome by brute force. But he's a gentle, friendly,
sweet bloke.
Who wants to do things sportsmanlike, one-on-one as God intended.
Except for the fact that he's 3 foot taller than everyone else.
I mean, I think he was about 7 foot tall in real life, just over.
I mean, I do sort of, and again, it was going to happen. I do wonder how much of his character in The Princess Bride influenced the writing of Hagrid in the Harry Potter series. That sort of sweet, gentle giant. Because the characters are incredibly similar, and it's not just a size thing.
Well, I mean,
that's a version of you expect the big bloke to be a real, a nasty piece of work, and he's just not.
Though that being said, the gentle giant is, even before the Princess Bride was a pre-existing trope. But in the context of the structure of the story, the trope that you would have been expecting is a mindless, angry brute.
And that's what this story is very good at doing. It subverts its own expectations. Or the expectations of its own audience, which is just, there's so many levels of it going backwards and forwards. And despite the fact that at its core, it's a very simplistic story. It's bleeding complicated to assess critically.
And as I said earlier in the comments, it's also got Mel Smith and Peter Cook in. If that does not make this the perfect film, I mean, But I mean, you go through the cast. It is a real who's who, and I mean, you probably saw me joking in there earlier. Anyone who watches House of Cards, who said Buttercup would be a bit of a bitch. Well, why is anybody surprised at Claire Underwood now? Anyone who's watched House of Cards, the warning signs were there.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that the giant loses because you use a different set is because he was mostly fighting groups of people, and you use a different set of moves fighting a group of people than you do when you're only fighting one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
This is why Andre the Giant won all those battle royals but lost to Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
A totally different style of fighting.
So any other notes on the contest of on the trial of strength?
Not really.
Not particularly. I do like the sort of, I'm going to call it what shall we call it? Platonic heterosexual life partners of Inigo Montoya and Fezzik.
Yeah.
And I assure you, once you get into the fan fiction, it's no longer platonic or heterosexual.
Well, it seems like that's the way of fanfic is. Nothing is platonic or heterosexual.
It's the rules of the internet. If you can think it, there is fanfic of it. If there's fanfic of it, there's slash of it.
we've been threatened. I think we, some of us who appear on Dave's streams quite a bit, including Manda, we've been threatened that there's some fan fiction coming out from Nerdy and Sammy between them, and I dread to think what it's going to be if it ever gets published.
Yeah.
Listen, I just wanted to pop in and just say a bit about the Andre the Giant, because it's something I could talk about at length. That guy, because he's just one of the most interesting figures. I think he was one of the most interesting figures of the 70s and 80s. Because it's more. The more you read about it, the more it seems far fetched, and yet the more actually it's real. So, but unfortunately, at the time that he made this was a time when he was in a lot of pain, and actually he should have been dead by this point. And he would die about 6 years or so after this movie was made, which is tragic to think that in this world that he also probably spent the last 5 or 6 years of his life in constant agony. Is quite sad to think about. But anyway, look, I'm gonna have to drop because I promised Ilya I'd be a guest on her stream, which is coming up in a bit, and to sit down with the Bunkers channel. So I better get ready for that. So
okay, yeah,
cool. Well, take care, Jeff. Thanks for popping in.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Cool. See you later.
Yep. So now we move to the test of the trial of wits, which is a battle to the death.
Never go up against a Sicilian when death is on the line.
Yeah. But the thing is, the trope for that, the trope the trope that's subverted here is the moment Vicini accepted the terms, he lost.
Yeah.
Because we get this brilliant scene where, Wesley
it's a very mythical thing about, you do your bit and then I'll jump in.
Yeah. Where Wesley takes out the iocane powder, which is colorless, odorless, tasteless, and dissolves instantly in water, and is one of the more deadly poisons known to man. And he spikes the wine, or one of the wine glasses, supposedly, and challenges Vicini to figure out which chalice has been poisoned. And we have this brilliant monologue where Vicini is going back and forth, listing out all the reasons why he couldn't choose either glass.
Yeah, but the thing is with that as well, he's trying way too hard because he actually hits on exactly what happens and dismisses it.
Yeah.
And again, that's a trope. But this whole thing of how Wesley beat that, there's historical precedent for it. There's definitely literary precedent for it. And he's kind of, that's the one thing in the whole film, even the first time I watched it, that didn't surprise me.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I expected to happen, because Wesley supplied the poison.
Yeah.
Why is Wesley carrying around poison?
Yeah.
Of course he's immune to it.
Yeah.
He's the Dread Pirate Roberts. He's supposed to. Yeah, I just.
But, you bested my giant, so you are strong. So in trusting your own strength, you believe that you could survive the poison chalice. So I cannot drink the wine in front of you. But you have also bested my Spaniard, which means you have studied, and in studying you have learned that man is mortal, and thus fearing for your own mortality, you would want the poison as far from you as possible, so I can clearly not drink the wine in front of me.
Mm.
But iocane powder comes from Australia, which is peopled entirely by criminals.
I'm British, I'm not saying a word.
Yeah. And of course, he goes for the look over there. Wesley looks away. He switches the glasses, says, I drink from mine, you drink from yours. Laughs because he switched, he says, because I switched the glasses when your backs were turned, when your back was turned. There are two things that you should never get involved in a land war in Asia, and something else, and
no, the two. It is. It's never get involved in a land war with Asia.
No,
and
but
never go up against a Sicilian when there is.
You've fallen into one of the classic blunders, two of which are never get involved in a land war in Asia. There's another one, and then he says, but lesser known is never go up against a Sicilian when death is on the line. And then he laughs and dies. Hold on.
Yeah. Obviously, mid-laugh poisoning, again, another one. But
okay, there is. You fell victim to one of the classic blunders, the most famous of which is never get involved in a land war in Asia. But also, only slightly less well known is never go against a Sicilian when death is on the line. Yeah.
I mean, what's interesting is as well, this film came out right at the end of the Cold War.
Yeah.
And never get involved in a land war in Asia. Well,
yeah. Yeah.
The Russians might have something to say about that. And then the Americans, again, and then the Americans again, and then I thought this film was popular in America.
Well, some folks are born made to wave the flag.
Anyhow, I get thunder in the village coming, you're dead.
And
wait, what, Sammy?
Yeah, sorry, Sammy. It's a quote from the movie.
And as a historian, I had to do that. But yeah, anyway, so we've got his 3 trials. He's done that. And he's beaten them all. Which, again, is a subversion because usually you fail at least one trial.
It depends on the story.
It depends on the story. But generally, the hero will fail at least one trial to build up tension.
Yeah. Or just barely edge through by the skin of his teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is somewhat of a subversion, but it's not as strong of a subversion as most of the other tropes in the movie, because he does have a bit of, he is equally skilled in the trial of skill. So it's a much closer thing in that trial than the other two. Which is a subversion in and of itself, because usually the more dire one is the one that's pulled through by the skin of their teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Buttercup recognizes the Dread Pirate Roberts and wishes that he would die and pushes him into a ravine.
Mm-hmm.
To which Wesley replies, "As you wish."
So much going on in that scene, especially with the tropes.
Yeah.
you know, let's see.
Well, one trope that is very much subverted is he doesn't immediately reveal his identity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because usually the hero immediately reveals their identity to the damsel in distress, and there's the happy reunion.
Mm-hmm. We get the I did want to point out the blade always lands pointy ending.
Yeah.
In the Inigo Montoya. And I'm taking these three and bouncing backwards and forwards because those three things really are, they're essentially your main part of your first act.
Yeah.
But she's, break the cutie. It kind of going on there a little bit, although it happens a bit more later. And you've got there's the catchphrase, obviously.
Yeah.
Catchphrases are a big thing in this film.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that everyone's got one. Yeah. It's a little bit of a deathbed confession going on with the fall down the mountain, the cliff. There's just so much with her there.
Yeah.
And the way it cuts back to the kid as well, it's very much sort of derails with details a bit going on there. The kid doing the double take. But she's there's a depth to Buttercup that's I think some people miss. And she definitely didn't have it at the beginning when she was running him around like a skivvy, but she develops it very quickly.
Yeah.
The reason I've gone quiet is because I'm thinking through Buttercup's character, and she gets a really nice arc in this because she grows so much. And yet she is essentially the same naive blonde little girl from the backwaters.
Yeah.
It's very cleverly done because you've got the interclass romances going on.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, she does not start out as a nice person.
No, she doesn't.
And that's a real subversion of a trope as well, I think, because the princess is always the nice one. She's the Cinderella character.
Because, like the princess types of, like when it comes to like fairy tales and folk tales with princesses, there's only really two roles that the princess really plays. One is the damsel in distress, the object to be, the MacGuffin.
Mm-hmm.
And two is the object lesson that if you're a good person, good things will come to you.
Yeah, and if you're a good person, good people are pretty. It's that one.
Yeah.
It's that trope. These two, both Wesley and Buttercup, do meet the golden hair, golden heart trope.
Yeah.
But she's very, I don't know. She's a little bit of a sort of, she starts off as this sort of parody. She's a bit of a Sue. Everyone wants her. No one quite knows why. She's not a nice person. But we see her grow into everything Wesley believes she is. And, love makes us better. And the fact that it's the female character going through the arc is a beautiful subversion of expectation.
Yeah, because usually it's the male that goes through that arc to try and win the female.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Well, and it's also kind of a subversion because, like, from the beginning of this movie, they're already in love with each other. They're not trying to win each other.
Yeah.
They're basically the world is trying to drive them apart, and they're trying to maintain, it's their love against the world, and of course true love wins in the end.
Mm-hmm. This is what I do like about this scene, though, and I want to go into it. Wesley's sarcasm.
Yeah.
He's such a sarcastic little shit.
Yeah.
He is. He is.
Yeah.
Telling her about how he killed the levels of how the Dread Pirate Robert killed Wesley.
Yeah.
And it's Wesley. And yeah. And it's all sarcastic confessions, and he's just.
I think in this, like, this is Buttercup's test.
Mm.
Wesley went through his own trials, to win Buttercup, and this is Buttercup's trial to win Wesley.
Yeah, she has to recognize him on her own terms and has to recognize him independently and remember what he would have said.
Yeah.
But she also has to prove herself a match for him, which she does by pushing him over the edge.
Yeah, and also prove that, she is is faithful, because, Wesley already proved that by chasing her. Well, that's actually technically, the trial in regards to the Cliffs of Despair.
Mm-hmm.
Is he has the gun? Does he have the? It's not a trial of prowess. It's a trial of will and, not faith, but you know what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, it's a trial of loyalty.
Yeah, it's a trial of loyalty.
Whether she actually stuck with him or not.
Yeah.
And this is where we see her depth when she tells him, I died. And she does deliver a little bit of a shut up Kirk to that. Yeah. When she tells him in that she, I died that day. And she does this perfectly of her own accord. It's her conscience that really makes her cling to Wesley's memory.
Yeah.
And you do wonder how much of that is guilt for the way she treated him for so long.
Yeah.
So she's. The whole story is very. This is the thing about this story. You can take it very. Yeah. It's a fun romp, or you can really, really think about it so much so you can't get the words out of what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Which is what's happening to me right now, why I'm umming and ahhing and what have you. So,
And of course, that, this is kind of what Media Musings is about, is, getting into the themes and why, and what the film is exploring.
Mm-hmm.
And Princess Bride is very much an exploration of, your European fairy stories and folklore. Mm-hmm. And how that tradition of fairy tales and folklore continues on through generations.
and it's again, it's this, and it's shown in the film as well of passing that through from grandfather to grandson.
Yeah.
And you know that boy's going to grow up, and in 30 years or whatever, 40 years, he's going to be sat with his own grandson reading the same damn book and probably having the same damn conversation.
Yeah. But anyways, so they move on, into the fire swamp, which once again we get the trope of 3. Because the fire swamp has 3 famous dangers. The fire spurts, which we can avoid because there's a sputtering pop at the beginning. And the lightning sand, which, which you happen to discover already. But what about the ROUSs? Well, I don't believe they exist. Whomp.
And she's very much the neutral female there because there's literally one right behind her as he says that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fire swamp mostly it's largely fun filler in terms of story purpose. I mean, it's there, like, we learn, it's at the beginning as they're entering it, we learn Wesley's, we learn about the Dread Pirate Roberts and how there isn't just one Dread Pirate Roberts. It's
and this is that trope. Now, on TV tropes, this trope's called Tom the Dark Lord. Well, actually, this obviously predates the naming of that trope. And it's the idea of it's the name that matters.
Yeah.
Which is kind of subverted in the entire film. Because it's the subversion of naming and naming tropes. Because how many, the young boy doesn't want to read the story because it's the Princess Bride and it sounds girly.
Yeah.
But actually, it's a great story. It's the same thing of I looked at this film and went, "What?" It's that internal textual playing with the audience and putting the audience in different ways. This is why I call it a satire, because it reveals the audience to themselves as you're watching.
Well, and of course, no one would surrender to the Dread Pirate, Wesley.
Exactly. Because names have power.
Yeah.
It's the power of names, isn't it? Just like how many people haven't watched this film because they've looked at the name and gone, ugh.
Yeah.
Which is just funny to me. And it should be funny to anyone who's actually seen the film.
Yeah.
Which is the whole sort of thing it's playing off as well.
Yeah. And, also the good night, Wesley. Sleep well. Most likely kill you in the morning.
Yeah. Discussing the weather.
Yeah. And, and of course his, internship under the Dread Pirate Roberts is like...
Yeah, every day he's threatened to be killed and he still goes back. But it's... The thing with that as well, remembering, remembering manners. Manners are memorable. It's that trope, isn't it? He picked him because he said, please.
Yes.
And you would think if you're pleading for your life, that's the first word that comes out your mouth. But apparently not.
Yeah. So, or it is, more sincere. Because, he had to go back to Buttercup, his true love.
And his pleas were unselfish, whereas everyone else is. I think that's something that was done in Pirates of the Caribbean as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
If I remember right, sending Will to the ship his father was on. It's been a long time since I've watched that franchise.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at is all these films, and again, Pirates of the Caribbean is another one that tries to subvert traditional folklore tales of pirates and princesses and things. And it's that these films that I'm naming off the top of my head are that genre. Pirates of the Caribbean, Shrek, The Princess Bride.
Yeah.
Are there any others, really? Maybe some modern adaptations of Peter Pan?
Or
the film version, possibly, with Robbie Williams.
You're talking about Hook.
Hook, yeah.
I actually haven't seen Hook. I know that look. That is the "we will remedy this" look.
It's either the "we will remedy this" or "what on earth, you poor deprived child." That's the same look I got when he first told me he'd never read Harry Potter as a child.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll get you watching Hook. It's deathbed confessions, but it's also that moment where she realizes, she thought she'd recognize Wesley when he came home, no matter what he looked like, and she'd love him regardless. And she totally missed it.
Yeah.
And it's a learning moment for both of them when she pushes him over that cliff.
Yeah.
So anyway, moving on to the next scene.
Yeah. And, and basically, yeah, like I said, story-wise, the Fire Swamp doesn't really serve much purpose, in my opinion. It's enjoyable to watch, but it doesn't really serve much purpose.
I think it's just there, isn't it, for a little bit of action.
Yeah. It's basically there to keep the plot momentum up.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they're captured by Prince Humperdinck because, he can track a falcon on a cloudy day. He can find you.
Yeah. There is this, I don't know why, but there is this trope of the bad guy can find anyone.
Yeah. Though, it's more that, well, also, Humperdinck is, the noble huntsman.
Although in the book, I'm led to believe that he was actually supposed to be quite powerful physically as well.
Yeah.
So that was lost in adaptation.
Yeah.
I don't know. I get Henry VIII vibes from Humperdinck.
Yeah.
I do get a little bit sort of, the young, charismatic king, prince, renowned hunter, ladies' man.
Is that the only Henry VIII vibe you're getting?
Well, killing his wife.
Yeah.
I was getting there. Give me a moment. I didn't want to put all the spoilers out there. Although it is nearly 40-year-old film, 30-year-old film.
Well, yeah, I already dropped that. But yeah, it's 33 years old.
Yeah. So we get them through the swamp, which is fun because you see it's a moment of bonding for them, isn't it? It's bonding in the face of in adverse circumstances.
Danger. Yeah.
My hero and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So that's that bit covered. And again, it's another tick box in that list of what makes a perfect movie.
Yeah.
And then we move on.
Yeah. And, Wesley is put into the pit of despair.
The overblown names for some of these places. I know it's a trope and I know they're taking shreds out of it, but ugh.
And I love that he like the albinos got like that really gravelly voice, and then he's like, don't even think about trying to escape. It's like,
no, because it's that trope, isn't it? Albinos are freaks, albinos are evil, and then it's actually no, he just has a cough.
Yeah.
And again, this is something I will say to almost every point anyone could raise about this film. It's a satire.
Yeah.
Even the turning the machine up to 11.
Yeah. It sets up a trope and then subverts it.
Yeah, and then takes it out at the knees.
Yeah.
Which is fun because you get halfway through the film and you begin to expect it to do that, and then it stops doing that.
Yeah, and because Fezzik fights or finds Inigo in the Forest of Thieves, or in the Thieves' Forest, and
bromance in shoes,
and Inigo hears Wesley's tortured cries and recognizes them for the cries of a man who is losing his true love. And then like how Inigo finds the entrance is very much like
it's such a subversion of
it's subverting the trope that the movie has made of trope subversion.
Yeah, because praying to find it and then not finding it and then finding it when he stops praying to find it.
Well, because no, so he goes and then he prays, and he asks, the spirit of his father to guide his sword. And and the sword points him at the right tree, but he doesn't get the secret latch until he bangs against it in despair.
Yeah, so it's that again, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's another one of you were trying too hard. Stop trying so hard. It's that trope.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to let the chips fall where they may, and it'll all work out in the end. And then we've got obviously the torture device itself. Unspeakable torture.
Yeah. And you know what? So let's wrap. Let's get this wrapped up real quickly because we're pretty near the end.
So we'll wrap it up with Wesley being dragged out of that torture chamber,
mostly dead.
Mostly dead. Nice cliffhanger to leave it on. Although again, if you haven't seen the film, Wesley mostly dead. Now, mostly dead is not totally dead, but we'll get to that next time.
Yeah. Well, not next time as in next week, because next week is the belated year anniversary of my channel. And since my first video was covering the evangelicals' petition to Netflix to get them to try and stop airing Good Omens, we are covering Good Omens on Media Musings next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be here for that. That sounds fun.
Yeah. And any shilling?
Jeff and I are continuing with our Asterix and Obelix streams. We did Asterix in Spain this week. I have no idea what we're doing next week. I forgot to ask. But it should be fun. It always is. We do that right before Media Musings every Sunday. And we just go through them, have a chat about the history of the story. I do a fair bit of fangirling in that one. So yeah, enjoy. Come along, see that if you like. I'm also on Twitter at Danger Hissy. Fan fiction, Hissy the Danger Noodle. Always obey the tags and the warnings. Don't read it if it upsets you. That's not what it's there for. But enjoy if you enjoy. Everything else I do in conjunction with Ring. So I'm gonna let him shill that stuff.
Yeah. So on Saturdays I have secular D&D, which I run. Hissy, Julie LaVoice of Wine and Reason, Santi the Sane, and Geo Sam, who is in the chat, or who was in the chat. Hi. All play. Every week I do meet. On Sunday I do Media Musings. I did a atheist flashback on Not Just channel. So if you missed that, jump over to his channel to check that out. But after you watch Ilya's stream on Sit Down with Debunkers. And also, I have a Teespring store now. Link is in the chat, and I'll put it in the description later.
Cool.
Yeah. So, taglines.
Take care, be good, and as always, if you can't be good, be careful.
Yeah. And remember, indoctrination is a hell of a drug.